you're not growing. This chapter reminds us that life is not shaped by what others do to us, but by how we respond, adapt, and transform. A person who blames others for their setbacks becomes trapped in a cycle of excuses and missed opportunities, while a person who accepts responsibility gains the freedom to learn, improve, and rise above challenges. Imagine someone who fails an exam and says, "The teacher was unfair." Or someone who misses a promotion and insists, "The boss just doesn't like me." These thoughts may protect the ego in the moment, but they block growth and keep the person stuck in mediocrity. Growth begins the moment we ask, "What could I have done differently? How can I improve next time?" This shift in thinking is the foundation of resilience, discipline, and success. It is not about ignoring unfairness in life. It is about focusing on what you can control. When you turn your energy inward, you strengthen your character, your skills, and your mindset. Life is a constant journey of discovery, a wide road, filled with both opportunities and obstacles, and the first step toward genuine growth begins with accepting that you, and only you, are responsible for the direction your life takes. In this sense, Chapter 1 is about setting the foundation for personal accountability. The realization that everything you dream of, everything you desire, and everything you wish to become will remain distant unless you acknowledge that you are the driver of your destiny, not a passenger waiting for someone else to steer. Because too often people blame their environment, their family, their bosses, their lack of luck, or even fate for their failures. But this mindset breeds helplessness. Whereas the moment you embrace responsibility, the moment you say, "I am in charge of how I respond," you unlock the most powerful tool of self-transformation. For you begin to see challenges not as walls blocking you, but as invitations to climb higher. And when you understand this, your life shifts dramatically, since the energy, once wasted on complaints and excuses, can now be channeled into solutions, action, and creativity. So this chapter calls on you to examine your inner dialogue, because growth is not born from silence, but from the words you whisper to us every single day. Words that can either enslave you in fear or liberate you into confidence. For self-talk is the soil in which your future grows, and if that soil is filled with negativity, statements like, "I'm not good enough," "I can't do this," "Life is unfair," then your seeds of potential will wither before they even sprout. But if you consciously choose to nourish that soil with empowering words, such as, I am learning. I am strong. I am capable of my effort. You create a garden of resilience and strength from within. And this is not mere theory. It is the lived reality of every individual who has ever transformed their life. Because whether you look at great leaders, athletes, or innovators, their journeys began not with external help, but with the conviction that they could rise. So in this first chapter, we ask you to look at the mirror of your life honestly and courageously, to see not only your strengths, but also your weaknesses, to accept the truth that while others may influence your path, it is ultimately your decisions, your mindset, and your actions that shape your outcomes. And yes, there will be failures along the way, moments when you fall flat, when the world seems stacked against you. But in those moments lies the secret to growth. For each failure whispers a lesson if only you are willing to listen. And each setback holds a hidden strength, if only you are willing to look for it. So do not shrink from your struggles or blame others for them. Instead, embrace them as teachers, knowing that every mountain climbed begins with the courage to take the first step, and with every step forward, your self-belief deepens, your skills sharpen, and your vision clears, because responsibility is not a burden, but a gift. It grants you freedom, the freedom to change, to improve, to evolve into someone you could not have imagined before. And when you practice this every day, when you replace excuses with ownership and negative self-talk with empowering dialogue, you begin to notice shifts, both small and profound. Suddenly, you are calmer under pressure, more persistent in challenges, less shaken by criticism, and more energized by possibility. And this is the mindset that separates those who merely exist from those who truly live. So as you walk through this first chapter, remind yourself that the most important battle you will ever fight is not with the world, but with the voice inside your head. And if you win that battle by training your mind to speak with hope, courage, and responsibility, then you will win every other battle that life places before you. For growth is not reserved for the lucky or the privileged. It is reserved for the committed, for the resilient, for the accountable. And that begins here, in this very moment, with the choice to stop blaming and start building, the choice to stop waiting and start acting, the choice to stop doubting and start affirming. Because your story is yours to write, and chapter 1 is your invitation to pick up the pen, accept ownership, and set the foundation for the extraordinary chapters that follow. Every journey of growth begins with a seed of belief. And Chapter 2 is about understanding the power of that belief. Because if you do not believe in yourself, no one else's belief will ever be enough to sustain you, and the harsh truth is that the world will often doubt you, criticize you, underestimate you, or even ignore you. But none of that matters if your inner voice is strong enough to say, I will keep going, I will keep learning, I will keep rising. And this is where the concept of mindset becomes not just a word, but a way of living. For mindset is the invisible force that guides your choices, shapes your habits, and determines whether you see a challenge as a dead end or a doorway. And the difference between people who grow and those who remain stuck is rarely talent or opportunity. It is almost always the mindset they carry. Because a person with a fixed mindset says, "This is just how I am. I can't change." While a person with a growth mindset says, "I may not know it yet, but I can learn. I can improve. I can adapt." And this difference is like night and day. For the one shuts the door before they even try, and the other keeps the door open no matter how difficult the path may be. And so this chapter challenges you to observe your own thoughts carefully, to listen to how you speak to yourself in moments of failure, in moments of rejection, in moments when life throws obstacles at you. Because it is easy to be positive when everything is smooth. But real strength shows when the storm comes, and you can still say, "I am capable. I will endure. I will rise." And self-talk is the engine that keeps this mindset alive. For your brain listens to your words, and your body responds to your brain, which means when you tell yourself, "I'm hopeless. I'll never make it," your energy drains, your creativity shuts down, and your courage collapses. But when you tell yourself, "I'm learning, I'm growing, I'll try again," you reignite the fire of persistence and create momentum to keep moving forward. And this is not a one-time practice, but a daily discipline. Like exercising a muscle that grows stronger only through repetition and effort. So you must become aware of the small phrases you use with yourself. Phrases like, "I can't," "I'm bad at this," or "It's impossible," and begin to consciously replace them with empowering ones. Because words shape your reality. And the story you tell yourself is the life you end up living. And if that story is full of defeat, you will live defeated. But if that story is full of hope, you will live with purpose and direction. And you must remember that even the most successful people started with doubt, with uncertainty, with fear. But what carried them through was not that they had all the answers, but that they were willing to keep asking, to keep moving, to keep trying. And this is what separates the ordinary from the extraordinary, the willingness to believe in growth when nothing around you gives evidence of it. Yet, and so in Chapter 2, we invite you to see your challenges not as signals to stop, but as signals to stretch, because growth only comes at the edge of discomfort. The place where fear whispers that you might fail, but courage replies that you might also fly, and it is here where belief becomes your anchor, your inner voice becomes your compass, and your mindset becomes your engine. So start telling yourself a new story. Start affirming your strength instead of your weakness. Start reminding yourself daily that progress is not about perfection, but about persistence. And slowly, you will notice how this shift in mindset changes everything else. Your relationships improve because you are no longer defensive, but open to learning. Your career grows because you seek solutions instead of excuses. Your personal goals feel achievable because you approach them with curiosity rather than fear. And all of this begins with the choice to believe in growth, the choice to practice positive self-talk, the choice to stop saying, "I can't," and start saying, "I'll try." Because the truth is you will fail sometimes. You will stumble. You will make mistakes. But that is not the end of the story. It is only a chapter, and the next chapter is always waiting for you to turn the page, to rise again, to grow stronger. And that is why Chapter 2 is a reminder that the power of belief is not about ignoring reality or pretending that life is easy, but about facing reality with courage, about saying to yourself, "Yes, this is hard, but I am harder. Yes, this is challenging, but I am capable. Yes, this hurts, but I will heal, and I will grow." And when you live with that mindset, no obstacle can truly defeat you, because you will always find a way forward. And so the lesson is clear. Growth is not about avoiding pain or difficulty, but about transforming the way you think, the way you talk to yourself, and the way you interpret the challenges in front of you. And when you master this, when you replace blame with belief, negativity with empowerment, and fear with courage, then you begin to live not as a victim of circumstance, but as the author of your destiny. And Chapter 2 is your call to strengthen your belief, to nurture your mindset, and to fill your inner voice with the kind of words that make you unshakable in the face of whatever life throws at you. The essence of Chapter 3 is perseverance. the unyielding commitment to keep moving forward, even when the weight of the world feels unbearable. Because while belief may ignite the fire, and responsibility may provide direction, it is perseverance that keeps the flame alive through storms, setbacks, and endless nights of doubt. And without it, even the most ambitious dreams fade into dust. For the truth is that growth is never linear. It is not a straight road, but a winding path filled with hills to climb, valleys to crawl through, and moments where the temptation to quit whispers louder than the courage to continue. Yet the difference between those who achieve lasting change and those who remain trapped in cycles of frustration is the choice to persevere, to refuse to surrender, when everything around them screams that giving up would be easier. And this is why perseverance is not simply about stubbornness, but about vision, about keeping your eyes fixed on the bigger picture, even when the present feels unbearable. Because when you persevere, you are telling yourself and the world that your dream matters more than your discomfort. Your growth matters more than your excuses, and your purpose matters more than the opinions of others. And to develop this strength, you must first accept that hardship is not a punishment, but a training ground, a place where your character is tested and your resilience is refined. And if you view hardship as unfair, you will crumble beneath it. But if you see it as an opportunity to become stronger, you will endure and rise. And this shift is powered by the conversations you hold with yourself. For perseverance is sustained not by external applause, but by the quiet, yet powerful self talk that reminds you, one more step, one more try, one more day. And though these words may seem small, they carry immense power, because they transform what feels impossible into something manageable. And each time you repeat them, you build a habit of resilience, and habits shape destiny. So in this chapter, you are called to reflect on the moments in your life when you gave up too early, the times when you stopped because the journey grew uncomfortable, and to ask yourself honestly, did I quit because I truly could not continue? Or did I quit because I did not want to endure the discomfort of growth? And the truth is that most of us give up not because we are incapable, but because we choose the false comfort of quitting over the true reward of perseverance. Yet every story of greatness, from inventors who failed hundreds of times before succeeding, to athletes who trained for years before achieving glory, to ordinary people who overcame extraordinary odds, shares one common thread: perseverance, the refusal to stop, the choice to keep going. And so the challenge of Chapter 3 is not to eliminate difficulty, but to embrace it, to build within yourself the discipline to act, even when motivation fades, to remind yourself daily that growth requires consistency, and consistency requires perseverance. And this is why mindset is everything, because the mind will always try to convince you that quitting is easier. But the voice of perseverance counters that easier is not better, and comfort is not progress. So you must strengthen your inner dialogue until it is louder than the whispers of doubt. And this can be done by creating affirmations that reinforce your endurance, telling yourself, I am stronger than this moment. I have endured before and I will endure again. I am building something bigger than my pain. And with these words, you transform struggle into fuel, because perseverance is not about ignoring pain, but about using it as a reminder that growth is happening. And just as muscles grow, only after being broken down and rebuilt, so too does your spirit grow when tested by the trials of life. And while others may see the obstacle as a sign to stop, you must see it as a sign to dig deeper, to push harder, to last longer, because the truth is that perseverance is not a single act, but a lifestyle, a daily decision. No matter how many times you fall, and it is through this lifestyle that greatness is built. For no one ever accomplished anything meaningful without countless days of effort, unseen by the world. And perseverance is what allows you to keep moving even when no one is watching, no one is applauding, and no one seems to care, because you know that the journey is not about recognition, but about becoming the kind of person who refuses to be broken. And in the end, perseverance gives you a strength that cannot be bought, cannot be given, and cannot be faked. A strength that comes only from surviving storms that would have drowned a weaker spirit. And so in Chapter 3, the message is clear. Do not quit. Do not surrender. Do not believe the lie that comfort will bring you fulfillment. For only perseverance will carry you across the distance. Who you are now and who you are meant to be. And though the road will be hard, though you will stumble and fall, though you will feel like giving up, you must always remember the voice within that says, keep going. For that voice, repeated often enough, becomes your truth. And that truth will lead you through the valleys, over the mountains, and into the life you have been fighting for, because perseverance is the bridge between effort and success, between dreams and reality, between who you are and who you can become. And the question is not whether life will test you, but whether you will keep walking when it does. So let this chapter be your reminder that perseverance is not optional. It is essential. And if you can endure, if you can persist, if you can continue when others stop, you will discover that there is no obstacle too great, no failure too final, and no dream too far. For perseverance turns impossibility into inevitability. And that is the power you are called to embrace here and now. Chapter 4 is about discipline, the quiet force that transforms fleeting inspiration into lasting transformation. Because while responsibility sets the foundation, belief fuels the vision, and perseverance keeps you moving. When the path grows rough, it is discipline that ensures your steps are consistent, your actions are intentional, and your growth is sustainable. For discipline is the bridge between desire and achievement, between talking about what you want and actually living it. And many people fail not because they lack dreams or passion, but because they lack the ability to consistently show up and the work required. And this truth may feel harsh, but it is liberating, for it means that success is not reserved for the talented or the lucky, but for those who are willing to train their mind and body to follow, even when the mood has faded, because motivation is temporary and comes and goes like the wind, but discipline is steady, deliberate, and reliable. And this chapter asks you to imagine discipline not as a prison, but as freedom. The kind of freedom that comes from knowing you can rely on yourself. The freedom of not being enslaved to your moods, your distractions, or your excuses. And when you embrace discipline, you are choosing long-term fulfillment over short-term comfort. You are choosing to wake up and keep promises to yourself when it would be easier to sleep in, to study, when it would be easier to scroll, to train, when it would be easier to rest. And every time you choose discipline, you are sending a message to your subconscious mind that you are serious about your growth, that you are building a life not out of chance, but out of choice. And this is how discipline becomes not just a habit, but a character trait, something that defines who you are at your core. And it is here where positive self-talk once again becomes your greatest ally, because discipline requires you to constantly battle the excuses in your mind, the whispers that say, "I'll do it tomorrow," "It's too hard," or "I deserve a break." And if you let those whispers win, you weaken your spirit. But if you answer them with stronger words, "I will act now. I am capable of this challenge. I am building something greater there. my comfort. You empower the self to push forward. And each time you do, you strengthen the muscle of discipline. For discipline is a muscle, one that grows only through consistent use. And, just as lifting weights builds strength, practicing discipline in small daily tasks builds the ability to handle bigger challenges. So start with the basics. Make your bed. Finish what you start. Keep your word. Set small goals and follow through. Because each of these actions compounds into a life defined by reliability. And a reliable person is a powerful person. For when you can trust yourself, others begin to trust you too. And opportunities flow more easily toward those who are consistent than toward those who are inconsistent, no matter how talented they may be. And so this chapter challenges you to look at your own life and ask, where have I been inconsistent? Where have I broken promises to myself? Where have I chosen comfort over commitment? And then, to create a new standard, a higher standard where your words mean something, where your actions align with your intentions, because discipline is not about punishment, but about alignment, aligning your daily behavior with your deepest values and your highest vision. And the truth is that discipline requires sacrifice, but every sacrifice brings a greater reward. The sacrifice of wasting time brings the reward of progress. The sacrifice of indulgence brings the reward of health. The sacrifice of procrastination brings the reward of success, and once you experience the rewards of discipline, you begin to crave them more than you ever crave the fleeting pleasures of laziness or distraction. And in this way, discipline becomes a source of joy rather than struggle, a source of pride rather than resentment, because you realize that every act of discipline is proof that you are growing, that you are no longer controlled by weakness, but led by strength. And this realization creates momentum. Momentum that carries you further than motivation alone ever could. And the truth is that every great accomplishment you admire in history, every masterpiece, every innovation, every act of greatness was not born only of passion, but of discipline, the daily commitment to practice, to refine, to persist, to show up even when it was inconvenient. And that same discipline lives within you, waiting to be unleashed, waiting to be strengthened, waiting to be honored. And the way to honor it is to treat each day as an opportunity to keep your word to yourself, to treat every small decision as evidence of your character, and to silence the excuses that once held you back, because excuses build nothing but regret, while discipline builds a future you can be proud of. And when you internalize this truth, you stop searching for shortcuts and start building foundations. You stop relying on inspiration and start relying on routine, and slowly, day by day, you transform into someone unstoppable. Not because life became easy, but because you became strong. And so, Chapter 4 leaves you with this truth. Discipline is not the enemy of freedom. It is its guardian, because when you are disciplined, you are free to live a life of meaning, free from regret, free from self-doubt, free from the weight of unfulfilled potential. And though discipline requires effort, that effort becomes your liberation. And the more you practice it, the more you realize that discipline is the most profound act of self-respect, the proof that you value your future more than your excuses. And with this realization, you understand that discipline is not a cage but a key, the key to growth, the key to strength, the key to the life you deserve. And it begins not tomorrow, not next week, but now, in the smallest choices you make. For those choices are the building blocks of your destiny. And the question chapter asks you is simple. Will you choose comfort, or will you choose discipline? Because the choice you make today will echo through every tomorrow. Chapter 5 is about self-awareness, the mirror of the mind, the ability to look within and see yourself clearly. Not only your strengths, but also your weaknesses, your habits, your triggers, your patterns, and your blind spots. Because without self-awareness, growth is impossible, since you cannot change what you refuse to acknowledge. And too many people live their lives blind to their own behaviors, repeating the same mistakes over and over while blaming circumstances or other people. Yet, the truth is that transformation always begins with honest recognition, the willingness to face yourself without distortion, without excuses, without denial. And this requires courage, for it is easier to judge others than to examine ourselves, easier to point fingers outward than to turn the light inward. But when you dare to be self-aware, you discover the root of your struggles and the seeds of your potential. For awareness is the first step to improvement, and improvement is the essence of growth. And in this chapter, you are invited to slow down and reflect, to ask yourself questions that cut through the noise of daily life. What patterns do I repeat that hold me back? How do I react under stress? What stories do I tell myself when I fail? Do I see myself as capable? Or do I sabotage my own efforts through negative self-talk? These questions are not meant to shame, but to awaken. Because awareness without judgment is the tool of the wise, and self-awareness is not about perfection, but about clarity. The kind of clarity that allows you to see your actions for what they are, your motives for what they reveal, and your thoughts for the ways they either serve or sabotage you. And it is here that positive self-talk becomes more than encouragement. It becomes a guiding compass. Because when you are self-aware, you notice the tone of your inner voice. And when that voice is critical, harsh, or limiting, you recognize it and replace it with language that lifts you, strengthens you, and keeps you aligned with your values. For self-awareness is useless without adjustment, and adjustment comes from changing the words and actions that flow from awareness. And in this way, self-awareness is the foundation of mastery over your emotions, your choices, and your destiny. And to cultivate it, you must develop the habit of observation, to step outside yourself and watch how you move through the world, to pause before reacting, to notice the thoughts that rise before they control you. And this practice turns your life into a classroom where every experience is a lesson, every conflict a mirror, every success a signal of what you did well, and every failure a map of where you must grow. But awareness must be coupled with honesty, for many see themselves only through the lens of ego, inflating their strengths and hiding their flaws. Yet real self-awareness requires humility, the ability to admit, I was wrong here, I need to grow there, I can do better. And while this humility may sting at first, it is the medicine that heals arrogance and ignorance, because humility opens the door to feedback, and feedback, though sometimes uncomfortable, is the fastest path to growth for other see what we cannot see in ourselves. And instead of resisting their insights, we must learn to welcome them, weigh them, and use them, because self-awareness is not about living in shame, but about using knowledge as power. And the more you know yourself, the more control you have over your destiny, because the world may try to sway you with distractions, temptations, and pressures. But a self-aware person cannot be easily shaken, for they know who they are, what they stand for, and where they are going. And this clarity creates confidence, a confidence that is not loud or arrogant but steady and unshakable, because it is rooted in truth. And when you are rooted in truth, you can withstand any storm, any criticism, any doubt, because you are no longer defined by external voices, but guided by inner wisdom. And this chapter urges you to create moments of reflection daily, whether through journaling, meditation, or simply sitting in silence, because silence reveals what business hides. And in that silence, you begin to hear your true thoughts, your true desires, and your true fears. And once they are brought into the light, you can work with them, shape them, and transform them. And so self-awareness becomes the starting point of every improvement. You cannot improve your health if you are unaware of your unhealthy choices. You cannot improve your relationships if you are unaware of your toxic patterns. You cannot improve your career if you are unaware of your weaknesses or blind spots. And you cannot improve your mindset if you are unaware of the words you use to speak to yourself. And so this chapter reminds you that the key to growth is not running away from who you are, but turning inward and facing it bravely. Because the person you are today is the foundation for the person you are becoming. And the more you know that person, the more power you have to guide your evolution. And in this journey, do not fear what you discover within, for even your flaws are opportunities in disguise. Every weakness, a skill waiting to be developed. Every mistake, a lesson waiting to be learned. And every limitation, a wall waiting to be broken. And with awareness, you transform your relationship with yourself, shifting from criticism to compassion, from denial to acceptance, and from avoidance to courage. And it is through this transformation that you unlock the next levels of your growth. Because once you are self-aware, no excuse can blind you, no habit can hide from you, and no fear can control you without your consent. For you will see it, name it, and choose differently. And in that choice lies your freedom. So Chapter 5 calls on you to stop running, to stop hiding, to stop blaming, and instead to look in the mirror of awareness with courage and honesty. Because only then can you rewrite your story, reclaim your power, and grow into the version of yourself you were always meant to be. Chapter 6 is about the power of choices, the undeniable truth that every decision you make, no matter how small or insignificant it may seem in the moment, is shaping the direction of your life. Because life is not built in giant leaps alone, but in the accumulation of small, daily choices that compound into habits that shape your character, and character that ultimately determines your destiny. And yet many people walk through life unaware of this truth, believing that their outcomes are dictated by luck, circumstance, or other people, when in reality their future is being written every day in the choices they make, from the words they speak, to the food they eat, to the way they spend their time, to the thoughts they allow to live rent free in their mind And this is why choice is power. Because while you cannot control every event that happens to you, you can always control how you respond. And your response is a choice. And that choice can either move you closer to growth or further away from it, closer to your vision or further into stagnation. And so, this chapter invites you to take ownership of your choices, to stop pretending that they do not matter. Because they do. Every single one of them. And if you choose excuses instead of action, if you choose comfort instead of effort, if you choose to dwell on blame instead of responsibility, your life will reflect those choices. But if you choose courage over fear, discipline over laziness, growth over stagnation, then your life will begin to transform in ways that feel miraculous, but are in fact nothing more than the natural result of consistent, aligned decisions. And what makes this truth both empowering and challenging? That the responsibility is yours. No one else can make these choices for you. And no one else can live with the consequences but you. And so this chapter asks you to become deeply aware of the daily crossroads you face, the moments when you must decide whether to stay the same or to grow. Because those moments may feel small, like whether you choose to read or scroll, whether you choose to wake early or sleep in, whether you choose to speak kindly to yourself or feed your negativity. But over time, those small decisions multiply into the difference between success and failure, between strength and weakness, between a life lived intentionally and a life lived by default. And the power of choice is magnified by your self-talk, because the words you speak to yourself influence the choices you make, and the choices you make reinforce the story you believe about yourself. So if you constantly tell yourself, "I'm not disciplined. I'm not smart enough. I'm not capable," then you will unconsciously choose actions that prove that story right. But if you begin to tell yourself, "I am capable of growth. I am disciplined enough to keep my promises. I am worthy of success," then you will start to make choices that align with that identity. And slowly, you will become the person you tell yourself you are, which means the story you live is simply the accumulation of the choices you've made, guided by the words you repeat. And this realization is life changing, because it means you can shift your trajectory today by changing your choices today. And this does not require massive leaps, but consistent, intentional steps, like choosing to focus on solutions instead of problems, choosing to forgive instead of holding grudges, choosing to try again instead of quitting, choosing to learn instead of complaining. And while these choices may not bring instant results, over time they build momentum, and momentum creates transformation. Because success is not built in a single day, but in daily decisions repeated with persistence. And this is why the most successful people are not the ones who make the perfect choice every time, but the ones who keep choosing growth more often than they choose stagnation, who keep choosing action more often than they choose excuses, who keep choosing responsibility more often than they choose blame. And if you want to grow, you must do the same, because your life today is the reflection of the choices you made yesterday. And your life tomorrow will be the reflection of the choices you make today. And once you grasp this truth, you stop waiting for someone else to save you. You stop waiting for the perfect moment. You stop waiting for motivation. And you start making choices that align with the person you want to become. Because choice is a vote for your future self. Every decision is either strengthening or weakening the identity you are building. And so this chapter challenges you to pause before your choices, to ask yourself, does this choice move me closer to who I want to be, or does it move me further away? Does it strengthen my discipline, my belief, my resilience, or does it reinforce my excuses and my fears? And with that awareness, you can begin to live deliberately, no longer controlled by impulse or habit, but guided by clarity and intention. And while this path may not always be easy, it is always worth it, because at the end of the day, your life will not be defined by what you dreamed of or what you planned, but by what you chose to do. And if you choose wisely, consistently, and courageously, then the life you build will not be one of regret, but one of fulfillment, because you will know that every step of the way, you chose it, you owned it, and you grew because of it. And that is the power of choices, the silent yet unstoppable force shaping your destiny every single day. Chapter 7 is about resilience, the unbreakable spirit that allows you to bend, but not break, to stumble, but not stop, to be knocked down, but rise again with even greater determination, because no matter how much responsibility you take, how much belief you hold, how much discipline you build, and how many wise choices you make, life will still bring storms, failures, losses, betrayals, and setbacks. And in those moments, it is not perfection or planning that saves you, but resilience, the ability to keep moving forward when everything in you wants to, the capacity to adapt when your plans collapse, and the strength to find meaning in pain instead of letting it destroy you. Because resilience is not about living a life without challenges, but about developing the inner toughness to endure them and transform them. And this toughness does not come from denying pain or pretending everything is fine, but from facing it directly, acknowledging it, and still choosing to rise and hear positive self. Talk becomes the anchor that keeps you steady in the storm. Because when you are broken, when the world feels heavy, the words you speak to yourself determine whether you drown in despair or float toward hope. So, resilience begins with a decision. The decision to speak life over yourself, even in the valley, to say, I will not be defeated. I am stronger than this pain. I have survived before, and I will survive again. And though those words may feel hollow at first, they plant seeds of strength that grow with every repetition, and over time, they form an inner voice so strong that no external force can silence it. And this is why resilient people are not those who never suffer, but those who suffer and yet keep standing, keep believing, keep trying. Because resilience is not the absence of pain, but the mastery of response. And every time you endure and rise, you add another layer of armor to your character, another layer of wisdom to your spirit, until you become unshakable. And the most beautiful truth about resilience is that it is built through struggle itself. Because just as muscles grow stronger by being torn and rebuilt, the spirit grows tougher through trials, setbacks, and failures. So what you think is breaking, you may actually be shaping you into someone stronger than you ever imagined. And resilience is not something you are born with or without. It is something you cultivate, something you train like a muscle, by refusing to let pain define you, by refusing to let failure end you, by refusing to let hardship harden your heart into bitterness, and instead allowing it to soften your heart into empathy. Sharpen your mind into wisdom, and strengthen your soul into courage. And this is why resilience is at the core of every success story, because the truth is that everyone falls, everyone fails, everyone faces rejection, but only the resilient rise again and again until the world has no choice but to yield to their persistence. And so this chapter invites you to reflect on your own resilience, to ask yourself how you have responded to life's blows, whether you have let them bury you or build you, whether you have used them as excuses to stop or as reasons to grow. Because the difference between despair and resilience is often just one choice. The choice to stand back up. And standing up is not always about grand victories. Sometimes it is simply about surviving another day, taking another step, refusing to let go of hope. And those small acts of endurance accumulate into greatness over time. Because resilience is not about never falling, but about never staying down. And this mindset is fueled by how you frame your struggles. Because if you tell yourself, this is the end, then it will be. But if you tell yourself, this is the lesson, then you will learn, grow, and eventually triumph. And so resilience becomes a way of seeing the world, a way of interpreting challenges, not as curses, but as catalysts. And once you embrace this perspective, you stop running from pain and start using it, knowing that every scar carries a story of survival, every wound carries a seed of wisdom, and every trial carries the potential for transformation. When you live with this awareness, you no longer fear failure, because you know you can rise. You no longer fear rejection, because you know your worth is not defined by others. You no longer fear storms, because you know you carry within you the resilience to withstand them. And in that knowledge lies freedom. Freedom from fear, freedom from despair, freedom from the lie that you are weak. And so Chapter 7 reminds you that resilience is not extraordinary, but essential, not rare, but accessible to all who choose it. And if you commit to building it through your words, your mindset, and your daily choices, then, no matter what life throws at you, you will not be broken, because resilience means, even if you bend, you will always rise back stronger. And rising stronger is the true mark of growth. Chapter 8 is about the courage to take responsibility for your future. Because growth does not come from waiting, wishing, or blaming, but from the bold decision to say, "My life is mine, and I will shape it." And while earlier chapters have explored the importance of mindset, self-talk, choices, and resilience, here we must go deeper into the understanding that responsibility is not just about what you do when things go wrong, but about how you position yourself every single day to what you want. And this means stepping away from the comfort of excuses, stepping away from the illusion that someone else will rescue you, and stepping fully into the ownership of your vision, your actions, and your outcomes, because responsibility is both heavy and freeing. It is heavy because it means there is no one else to blame when you fall short. But it is freeing because it means there is no limit to what you can create when you fully own your power. And the paradox is that many people fear responsibility because they mistake it for burden. when in truth, it is the key to freedom. Because as long as you blame others, you are trapped. You are giving away control over your life to circumstances or people who may never change. But the moment you decide that your growth, your success, and your happiness are your responsibility, you reclaim your power. You take the pen to bat. You take the pen back into your own hand to write your story. And this requires courage, because it is easier to point outward. Easier to say, it's the system, it's my family, it's bad luck, than to look in the mirror and say, if it's always someone else's fault, I'm not growing. But growth demands honesty, and honesty demands courage. The courage to admit that you have wasted time, that you have chosen comfort, that you have believed lies about yourself, and yet also the courage to admit that you can choose differently, that you can grow, that you can build, and that your past choices do not define your future unless you let them. And this responsibility is not about self-condemnation, but about self-liberation. Because once you accept responsibility, you realize you have choices in every direction. You can learn, you can act, you can adapt, you can persist, and the more responsibility you take, the more doors you open. Because opportunities do not come to those who wait, but to those who prepare, to those who take responsibility for being ready when the door opens. And this is where positive self-talk becomes essential. Once again, because responsibility requires a strong inner foundation. And if your mind is full of self-doubt and self-criticism, you will avoid responsibility out of fear. But if your mind is full of encouragement and belief, you will embrace responsibility as the pathway to growth. And so the way you speak to yourself determines whether you run from responsibility or rise into it. Because the person who says, I can't handle it, will avoid it. But the person who says, I will figure it out, will step into it, and life will reward the one who takes ownership. And it is important to recognize that responsibility is not only about big, life-changing moments, but also about small, daily disciplines, about choosing to wake up and do the work, choosing to admit when you are wrong, choosing to improve instead of complain, and choosing to ask, what can I do? Instead of, why me? Because this shift in language alone transforms the way you live. Since, why me? Keeps you stuck. But what can I do? Propels you forward. And over time, this builds a life of growth. Because responsibility compounds, just like choices do. And the more you practice it, the stronger it becomes, until one day you look around and realize that the life you are living is no longer random, but intentional, no longer accidental, but chosen. And that awareness fills you with pride, because you know you built it with your own hands, your own decisions, your own courage. And yes, others may have helped you along the way, but you chose to accept that help. You chose to seek it out. You chose to apply what you learned. And so responsibility is not about control over every detail of life, but about control over how you respond to every detail. And that distinction is powerful, because life will always bring unpredictability. But responsibility says, I will not be passive. I will not be a victim. I will be the one who shapes my path, regardless of circumstances. And when you live this way, setbacks stop being permanent. Failures stop being fatal, and problems stop being excuses, because you refuse to hand over the keys to your growth, and you begin to see that the most successful, fulfilled, and resilient people are not the luckiest or the most privileged, but the most responsible, the ones who decide every day to take ownership, their actions, their learning, their mindset, and their future. And so Chapter 8 calls you to courage, the courage to stop running from responsibility and start embracing it as your greatest strength. Because once you do, you will never again wait for permission to grow. Never again wait for someone else to fix your life. And never again settle for being less than who you were meant to be. Because responsibility is the soil where growth takes root, and if you are brave enough to claim it, your life will never be the same. Chapter 9 is about the power of perspective. Because while responsibility, resilience, and choices shape the actions you take, it is perspective that shapes the meaning you attach to those actions and to the events of your life. And meaning is everything. Because two people can go through the exact same experience. One grows from it, the other is crushed by it, and the difference is not in the event itself but in the way it was perceived, the story told about it, and the interpretation given to it. Which means your growth is not determined by what happens to you, but by how you see it. And this is where perspective becomes the hidden force of transformation, because when you learn to frame challenges as lessons, instead of curses, failures, as feedback, instead of finality, setbacks, as setups instead of punishments, then your entire experience of life changes, and suddenly, what once felt unbearable becomes an opportunity for strength. What once felt like rejection becomes redirection. And what once felt like the end becomes the beginning of something new. And this is not about ignoring reality, or denying pain, but about seeing deeper into it, finding purpose in it, and choosing to extract meaning that empowers instead of destroys. And the truth is that your perspective is always a choice, just as much as your actions are, because every event brings with it countless possible interpretations, and the one you choose will either fuel your growth or feed your despair. And the most resilient people are not those who never suffer, but those who choose empowering perspectives in the midst of suffering, who tell themselves, "This is hard, but it is shaping me. This is painful, but it is preparing me. This is disappointing, but it is redirecting me." And those words become a shield against hopelessness and a compass pointing toward growth. And if you think about your own life, you will see that perspective has already shaped you, because moments you once saw as failures may now be blessings in disguise. Relationships you thought ruined, you may have actually revealed your strength. And struggles you hated may have planted seeds of wisdom you now depend on, which proves that time often changes perspective. But wisdom is learning to shift perspective in the present, without waiting for years to pass before you see the lesson. And this is where positive self-talk again becomes the bridge, because your perspective is built through the words you choose to describe your experience. And if your words are always negative, your perspective will be negative. But if your words are hopeful, your perspective will be hopeful. And so learning to change your language is learning to change your lens. And when you change your lens, you change your life. Because perspective not only influences how you feel, but also how you act. And when you believe an obstacle is permanent, you stop trying. But when you believe it is temporary, you keep pushing. And when you believe a failure is proof of weakness, you give up. But when you believe it is proof of progress, you try again. And these small differences in interpretation lead to enormous differences in outcomes, which is why perspective is the foundation of growth. Because without the right perspective, you cannot sustain the right choices, resilience, or responsibility. And the beautiful truth is that perspective can always be shifted, no matter how dark the moment. Because while you cannot always choose what happens, you can always choose what it means. And this truth has carried people through wars, prisons, losses, illnesses, and tragedies. Because they chose to believe their suffering was not wasted, that it had meaning, that it was shaping them into someone stronger. And if they could do it in the face of unimaginable pain, then so can you in your struggles, because your mind has the power to turn pain into power, loss into wisdom, and difficulty into growth. But only if you choose the perspective that allows it. And so this chapter challenges you to examine the stories you are telling yourself, to ask whether the meanings you attach to your experiences are keeping you stuck or moving you forward, and to realize that if the meaning you have chosen is disempowering, you can choose a new one right now, because meaning is never fixed. It is created, and the creation of meaning is the most powerful gift of the human mind, because it allows us to turn life itself into a teacher. And once you embrace this gift, you stop fearing what happens and start trusting what it can teach you. You stop running from failure and start looking for the lesson within it. You stop resenting struggle and start asking, how is this shaping me? And that single question changes everything, because the moment you ask it, you reclaim power. And with power comes growth. And so Chapter 9 reminds you that perspective is not passive but active. Not accidental but intentional. And if you are willing to master it, then you will be unstoppable. Because you will no longer be controlled by circumstances, but by choice. No longer defined by what happened, but by how you chose to see it. And in that choice lies freedom, resilience, and the limitless possibility of growth. Chapter 10 is about discipline, the quiet and often uncomfortable force that separates those who wish from those who achieve, those who dream from those who do. Because while perspective, resilience, and responsibility guide your mindset and choices, discipline is the consistent bridge between intention and reality. The daily practice of showing up even when you don't feel like it. The commitment to keep promises to yourself even when no one is watching. The ability to do what is necessary instead of what is easy. And without discipline, all the wisdom in the world remains untested, and all the dreams in your heart remain unrealized, because discipline is the execution of growth, the steady heartbeat that keeps progress alive. And it is often misunderstood as punishment or deprivation, when in reality, it is freedom. Because discipline frees you from the slavery of impulse, from the chains of procrastination, from the regret of wasted potential. And when you build discipline, you build trust with yourself. Because every time you do what you said you would do, you prove to yourself that you can be relied on. And that self-trust becomes the foundation of confidence. Because confidence is not built on pretending to be capable, but on proving it through consistent action. And so discipline becomes both the engine of growth and the evidence of belief. And yet, many people resist discipline because they crave comfort, because they tell themselves they will start tomorrow, because they confuse motivation with commitment. But motivation is fleeting. It rises and falls like the wind, while discipline is steady, unchanging, rooted in choice, rather than feeling. And the truth is that the people you admire, the ones who build, achieve, and grow, are not constantly motivated. They are disciplined. They act regardless of mood. And that is why their results are consistent. And if you want to grow, you must cultivate the same. And this does not require giant leaps, but small, repeated acts of alignment. Choosing to get up when you'd rather sleep. Choosing to practice when you'd rather quit. Choosing to keep going when your mind screams to stop. And those choices, though small, compound into greatness. Because discipline is compound interest in action. The invisible force that multiplies over time. And the beauty of is that anyone can build it. Because discipline is not a trait you are born with, but a skill you practice, like a muscle that strengthens with repetition. And the more you use it, the stronger it gets, until one day, the things that once felt impossible become automatic, and the habits that once felt heavy become natural. Because discipline creates habits, and habits create identity. And when you identify as someone disciplined, you no longer have to force yourself to act. You simply act, because that is who you are. And this is why discipline is freedom. Because it releases you from the exhausting battle of decision making, from the constant negotiation with your weaker self, and instead allows you to live with clarity, momentum, and strength, and the connection with self. Talk here is undeniable, because the words you speak to yourself either support your discipline or sabotage it. And if your inner voice is full of excuses, I'll do it later, it doesn't matter. Just once won't hurt. Then your discipline weakens. But if your inner voice is full of encouragement, I will keep my word. I can do hard things. I finish what I start. Then your discipline strengthens. And the more you practice this, the more your identity shifts. And once your identity shifts, discipline is no longer forced, but natural. Because you no longer see yourself as someone who tries, but as someone who does. And that is the secret of every great achievement. Because talent may start the journey. Perspective may guide it. Resilience may fuel it. But discipline finishes it. And finishing is everything. Because growth does not from what you begin, but from what you continue. what you complete, what you persevere through. And so this chapter challenges you to see discipline not as a punishment, but as a gift, a commitment to your higher self, a daily declaration that you are serious about growth. And it asks you to start small, to build momentum through little victories, to train your willpower in simple acts, because those acts ripple into bigger victories. And over time, they transform your life. Because the difference between the person you are and the person you want to be is nothing more than the discipline to act consistently on what you already know. And when you finally understand this, you stop waiting for perfect conditions. Stop chasing constant motivation. Stop looking for shortcuts. And instead dedicate yourself to the long, often unglamorous path of discipline. Because that path leads to mastery. And mastery leads to freedom, fulfillment, and growth. And so chapter 10 reminds you that discipline is not about denying yourself life's pleasures, but about denying yourself life's regrets. Not about taking the easy road, but about taking the meaningful one. And that if you build it, nothing will stop you. Because discipline is the ultimate proof of belief, the daily practice of growth, and the difference between a life of wasted potential and a life of extraordinary fulfillment. Chapter 11 is about the influence of environment, the often overlooked but deeply powerful force that shapes who you become. Because no matter how much responsibility you take, how resilient you are, how disciplined your habits become, your surroundings, the people you spend time with, the spaces you inhabit, the voices you allow into your mind, are constantly influencing your growth, either fueling it or limiting it. And two, often people underestimate this truth, believing they can outgrow toxic environments or remain unaffected by negativity. But the reality is that your environment is like the soil to a seed. No matter how much potential the seed has, if the soil is poor, growth is stunted. And the same is true for your life. Because even the strongest discipline and the most resilient perspective can be worn down if you are constantly surrounded by people who doubt you, distract you, or discourage you. And on the other hand, even small sparks of motivation can catch fire when you are surrounded by people who uplift you, challenge you, and believe in your potential, which is why one of the greatest acts of growth is the courage to curate your environment, to decide intentionally who and what you allow to shape your energy, your thoughts, and your future. And this requires honesty, because many times the people holding you back are the ones closest to you. the ones you care about deeply. And growth forces you to ask hard questions. Are these relationships helping me grow or keeping me stuck? Are these conversations feeding my vision or feeding my excuses? Is this space inspiring me to rise or numbing me into comfort? And those answers are not always easy, but they are necessary, because you cannot climb while clinging to anchors. And while it is true that you cannot always control every part of your environment, you can control much more than you think. You can control what you consume, the voices you listen to, the routines you follow, the spaces you create for yourself. And in this age of constant noise, those choices matter more than ever. Because every song, every story, every social media post, every conversation is planting seeds in your mind. And you must ask, what am I allowing to grow inside me? And the truth is that environment is not only about external spaces, but also about the internal environment you create in your own mind, the atmosphere of your thoughts, the climate of your self-talk. Because you carry your mental environment everywhere you go. And if it is filled with criticism, fear, and negativity, then even the most positive surroundings will feel hostile. But if it is filled with encouragement, hope, and belief, then, even in difficult environments, you will find the strength to rise. And so, mastering your environment begins both within and without, by becoming conscious of what you are absorbing and deliberate about what you are creating. And here, discipline meets awareness, because it takes discipline to step away from toxic influences, to let go of friendships that no longer serve your growth, to set boundaries with people who drain your energy, and to say no to spaces that do not align with who you are becoming. But it also takes awareness to replace those with environments that lift you, with people who stretch you, with conversations that challenge you, with books, ideas, and voices that feed your spirit. And though this may feel uncomfortable at first, it is essential, because growth thrives in supportive environments. And just as plants bend toward the sunlight, you too will naturally rise higher when you surround yourself with people and spaces that give you light. And what is remarkable is that environment not only influences who you become, but also reflects who you believe yourself to be, because the moment you raise your standards for yourself, you begin to seek out better environments. And the moment you accept mediocrity, you tolerate environments that reflect that mediocrity, which means curating your environment is also a declaration of self-worth, a way of saying, I deserve spaces and relationships that align with my growth. And this is not arrogance, but wisdom. Because you cannot grow fully while drowning in negativity. And if you truly value your future, you will protect it by protecting your environment. And this protection does not mean isolation, but selection. Choosing carefully what energies you let close, what words you let enter, what patterns you let repeat. And so this chapter challenges you to examine your environment honestly, to ask, who are the 5 people I spend the most time with, and how are they shaping me? To ask what kind of media I consume daily, and what it is teaching me. To ask what kind of spaces I inhabit, and whether they inspire or exhaust me, and to ask what kind of mental climate I am creating in my own thoughts. And with those answers, to take action, to make changes, to choose wisely, because while you cannot choose the soil you were planted in, you can choose to transplant yourself into soil that nourishes your growth. And once you do, you will discover how quickly you can flourish. Because environment is not everything. But without the right environment, everything else becomes harder. And with the right environment, everything else becomes easier. And so chapter 11 reminds you that growth is not only about what you do, but about where you do it. Not only about who you are, but about who you are with. Not only about your inner strength, but also about the external forces you allow to shape it. And that by curating your environment with courage and intention, you are setting the stage for your best self to emerge and thrive. Chapter is about patience, the often undervalued, but absolutely essential companion to growth. Because while resilience, responsibility, discipline, and environment create the foundation for progress, it is patience that allows you to stay the course long enough for results to appear. And without it, you will always abandon the process too soon, digging up seeds before they have the chance to sprout, judging yourself harshly for not yet blooming, and mistaking temporary stillness for permanent failure, when in truth growth is never instant, never linear, never obvious in its early stages, but always unfolding beneath the surface, in ways you cannot see. And this is where patience becomes both a test and a teacher. Testing your ability to trust the process and teaching you the value of consistency over urgency. Because the modern world has conditioned us to crave immediacy, to believe that everything should be fast, visible, and guaranteed. Yet true growth rarely operates on such timelines. It is slow, deliberate, unpredictable, requiring faith in the unseen and commitment to the long game. And if you want to grow into your fullest potential, you must be willing to endure the discomfort of waiting, the frustration of not yet, and the discipline of continuing when results are delayed, because impatience is one of the greatest killers of dreams, leading people to quit right before breakthrough, to settle right before transformation, to abandon the very habits that would have brought them success had they simply continued a little longer. And this is why patience is not passive, but active, not sitting idly, but persisting steadily, not waiting empty-handed but working faithfully, even when you do not see the fruit. Because patience is not about doing nothing, but about doing the right things for long enough that they compound. And it is in this compounding that true change occurs. Because no single workout transforms your body, no single conversation heals your mind, no single effort builds mastery, but repeated acts, sustained over time, do, and the patience to endure this repetition without visible reward is what separates those who grow from those who give up. And here again, self-talk plays a vital role, because the way you speak to yourself in the waiting determines whether you quit or persist. And if your words are impatient, "This isn't working, I'll never get there," what's the point? Then you will abandon the process. But if your words are encouraging, "Progress takes time. I'm building. Even if I can't see it yet, every step counts," then you will endure. And endurance always produces results eventually, even if not in the form you expected. And this is where perspective intersects with patience, because how you interpret the wait changes everything. And if you see waiting as wasted time, you will resent it. But if you see waiting as preparation, you will embrace it. And preparation is often what patience truly is, because life rarely delays without reason. And often the time between planting and harvest is the time you need to strengthen, to learn, to refine, so that when the fruit does come, you are ready to handle it. And this is why many people who rush success end up crushed by it, because they lack the patience to grow into the version of themselves capable of sustaining it. But when you honor patience, you grow not only in results, but in readiness, not only in outcomes, but in character. And so patience becomes not an obstacle, but a gift, because it gives you time to align, to deepen, to build on solid ground, instead of shaky shortcuts. And the more you practice it, the more you realize that patience is not weakness, but strength, not laziness, but endurance, not resignation, but faith. Faith that your effort matters, faith that progress is happening, even if unseen. Faith that your future is being built step by step. And this faith itself becomes a powerful motivator, allowing you to keep moving forward, even in the silence of results. And so this chapter calls you to redefine patience, to stop seeing it as delay, and start seeing it as development, to stop fighting the slowness of growth, and start trusting its necessity. Because all great things, strong trees, deep relationships, resilient minds, fulfilled lives, are grown, not rushed, and growth, by its very nature, requires patience. And if you can embrace that truth, if you can discipline yourself to keep showing up, keep speaking life, keep making choices, keep enduring setbacks, without demanding instant reward, then you will discover that patience is not a barrier to growth, but the very soil in which growth takes root. And one day, without realizing it, you will look back and see how far you have come, how much you have changed, how much has blossomed, and you will know it was patience that carried you, patience that protected your effort, patience that turned small daily actions into extraordinary transformation. And so, Chapter 12 reminds you that patience is not the enemy of progress, but the partner of growth. And that if you can learn to wait with faith and work with persistence, there is no limit to what you can become. Chapter 13 is about courage, the fire that ignites growth and propels a person beyond the comfortable, the familiar, and the safe. Because while patience and responsibility and discipline create a steady framework, it is courage that allows you to step into the unknown, face your fears, and do the hard things that growth demands. And without courage, you will remain trapped in cycles of hesitation, stuck repeating old patterns, afraid to fail, afraid to be judged, afraid to stretch, while courage whispers, "Do it anyway." And it is this whisper that changes everything, because courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward despite fear, not the eradication of uncertainty, but the willingness to embrace it, not the guarantee of success, but the choice to risk failure in pursuit of something greater. And if you want to grow, you must be willing to live with that risk, because growth always requires leaving behind the safety of what you know for the possibility of something better. And this is why courage and growth are inseparable, for no transformation ever happens within the boundaries of comfort. And yet comfort is exactly where most people try to stay, hoping to change without changing, hoping to advance without struggle. But that is impossible, because the very essence of growth is stepping beyond what is easy, and courage is the force that pushes you there. Even when your hands shake, your voice trembles, your heart races, and your mind doubts. And this is where self-talk becomes critical again. Because the voice in your head can either paralyze you with fear or empower you with courage. And if you tell yourself, "I'm not ready, I can't do this, what if I fail?" you will shrink back. But if you tell yourself, "I will learn through this, I will grow stronger by trying," failure is only feedback. Then you will find the courage to act. And action is what separates dreamers from doers. Because many people dream of change, but few act on it. And the difference is courage. The bravery to take the first step without knowing where the path leads, to speak the truth, even when it is unpopular, to pursue the goal, even when no one else believes in it, and to try again even when you have already failed. And this is why courage is often misunderstood as a dramatic act, something reserved for heroes and legends. But in truth, courage is in the small choices made daily. The courage to get up after a bad day. The courage to admit you were wrong. The courage to forgive yourself and start again. The courage to say no to what no longer serves you. The courage to say yes to opportunities that scare you. And every act of courage, no matter how small, compounds into greater growth. Because each time you face fear loses a little of its power. And each time you choose courage, your capacity expands. And soon the things that once terrified you become normal. The steps that once seemed impossible become routine. And this is the essence of personal evolution, that fear does not disappear, but your courage grows bigger than your fear. And in that moment, you are free. Because courage liberates you from the prison of what if, from the chains of doubt, from the weight of other people's opinions, and gives you the power to live authentically, boldly, unapologetically, which is the truest form of growth. And yes, courage will sometimes lead to failure, but failure itself becomes a teacher, shaping you, strengthening you, refining you. And so the brave never truly lose, because even in defeat they grow, and that growth prepares them for the next challenge, the next leap, the next opportunity, which would have been impossible without the courage to face the first. And so, Chapter 13 reminds us that courage is not optional. If you desire transformation, it is essential, because growth always hides on the other side of fear. And only those willing to face that fear will find it. And though the world may try to convince you that courage is reckless, that staying safe is wise, the truth is the opposite. Staying safe keeps you small, while courage allows you to expand. Staying safe locks you in place, while courage moves you forward. Staying safe protects you from failure, but also blocks you from success, while courage opens the door to both. And it is through walking through that door that you discover who you really are, not the version that fear dictates, but the version that freedom creates. And so, the challenge is simple, but profound. Will you choose courage? Even in small ways, even in quiet moments, even when no one is watching, because that choice, repeated again and again, will transform you into someone unrecognizable from who you are today, someone stronger, braver, freer, and more alive. And in the end, that is what growth is truly about. Becoming fully alive, fully yourself, fully capable of handling whatever life demands. And courage is the price of admission. So if you seek growth, do not wait for fear to vanish. Do not wait for certainty to appear. Do not wait for the perfect moment, because none of these will ever come. Instead, act with courage, now, in the imperfection of this moment, and you will discover that the moment you dare to step forward is the moment growth begins. Chapter 14 is about gratitude, the quiet but transformative force that shifts your perspective from what is missing to what is present, from what is lacking to what is abundant, and from complaint to contentment. Because without gratitude, no amount of success, wealth, recognition, or growth will ever feel enough. But with gratitude, even the smallest steps of progress feel meaningful. Even the simplest moments feel rich, and even the hardest struggles become teachers. And this chapter reminds us that growth is not just about striving forward, but also about pausing to appreciate the ground we have already covered. Because when you fail to notice how far you have come, you risk living in constant dissatisfaction, chasing more without recognizing the blessings already in your hands, and dissatisfaction, unchecked, becomes poison, making you blind to the beauty around you, deaf to the lessons life is teaching, and numb to the joy in the present moment. While gratitude opens your eyes, your ears, and your heart, expanding your awareness of life's richness and allowing you to grow, not only in achievement, but in fulfillment. And this matters deeply, because growth without gratitude is empty, like climbing a mountain only to realize the view doesn't matter to you, like achieving your dreams only to feel hollow, like chasing success and never feeling successful. And so, gratitude is the grounding force that makes growth sustainable and worthwhile, teaching you to celebrate progress as much as goals, to honor the journey as much as the destination, and to find joy not only in what you hope for, but in what you already hold. And while gratitude may sound simple, it requires deliberate practice. Because the human mind is wired to focus on problems, to dwell on what is missing, to compare ourselves to others, and gratitude is the antidote to that negativity. A conscious redirection of focus that reminds you that, while life is imperfect, it is also filled with gifts you often overlook. And when you begin to see these gifts, the breath in your lungs, the roof over your head, the people who care about you, the opportunities to learn, the strength to endure, you begin to shift from scarcity to abundance, and abundance fuels growth. Because when you see what you already have, you feel empowered to build more, rather than paralyzed by what you lack. And gratitude also strengthens resilience. When storms hit, instead of being consumed only by loss, you also notice what remains, what can still be built upon, what can still be cherished. And this mindset turns setbacks into seasons, rather than sentences, temporary pauses rather than permanent ends. And in that space, you find the courage to keep going, because gratitude keeps hope alive, reminding you that even in difficulty, there is something to hold on to, something to learn, something to honor. And so gratitude becomes a form of strength, as essential to growth as discipline or courage, though quieter, softer, more subtle, yet just as powerful. And gratitude also changes relationships, because when you practice it, you see the good in people more than their flaws. You appreciate their presence instead of resenting their absence. You express thankfulness instead of taking them for granted. And this nurtures connection, trust, and love, which are all vital for growth, because no one grows alone. And when gratitude flows, relationships flourish. And when relationships flourish, growth multiplies. And gratitude also shifts how you see yourself, because instead of focusing only on where you fall short, you learn to honor far you've come, to thank yourself for showing up, for enduring, for trying, even when no one else noticed. And this self-gratitude builds confidence and self-respect, which in turn fuel greater growth, because you stop seeing yourself only as a work in progress to be criticized, and begin seeing yourself as a journey to be celebrated. And when you celebrate yourself, you unlock motivation to keep becoming more, not out of shame, but out of love, not out of lack, but out of fullness. And this shift is revolutionary, because growth that comes from gratitude is sustainable, while growth that comes from self-criticism eventually burns out. And so gratitude is not just a feel-good emotion, but a survival tool, a compass, a guide, and a source of renewal. Because when you practice it, you continually recharge your spirit, continually refresh your perspective, continually remind yourself why the struggle is worth it. And this is why some of the most fulfilled people in the world are not the wealthiest or most famous, but those who live with deep gratitude, who find joy in simple moments, who honor progress more than perfection, who give thanks for both triumphs and trials, because they understand that growth is not only about reaching higher, but also about seeing deeper. And gratitude is the lens through which this depth appears. And so, Chapter 14 calls you to practice gratitude deliberately, to make it part of yourself. Talk, part of your daily reflection, part of your identity, to wake up and notice one thing you're thankful for, to pause before sleep and honor one lesson from the day, to tell yourself, I am grateful for what I have and excited for what I will build. Because this simple practice rewires your brain, strengthens your heart, and aligns your soul with growth. And over time, gratitude transforms from a habit into a way of being. And when it does, you stop needing life to be perfect to feel alive. You stop waiting for success to feel successful. You stop chasing fulfillment because you already feel fulfilled. And ironically, this is when growth accelerates, because when you are no longer weighed down by discontent, you are free to pursue your goals with joy, not desperation, with love, not fear, with abundance, not scarcity. And that shift changes everything. And so, gratitude is not just an accessory to growth, but anchor, not just a nice idea, but a necessary practice, because it grounds you, strengthens you, sustains you, and ultimately teaches you that growth is not only about reaching more, but about appreciating more. Not only about becoming more, but about seeing more. And when you live with gratitude, every step of the journey becomes growth itself. Chapter 15 is about accountability, the final, and perhaps most uncomfortable pillar of growth, because it forces you to confront yourself with honesty, to strip away excuses, to silence blame, and to recognize that your progress, your setbacks, your choices, and your life ultimately belong to you. And though it is tempting to believe that others hold the pen to your story, parents, teachers, bosses, friends, circumstances, or fate, the truth is that the only lasting growth comes when you take back the pen and own the narrative. And this chapter reminds you, if it is always someone else's fault, you are not growing. Because growth begins the moment you stop pointing outward and start looking inward, asking not, why did they do this to me? But, what can I learn from this? How can I respond differently? What must I change in myself to move forward? And this is the shift that separates the stagnant from the evolving, the passive from the proactive, the victim from the victor. Because, while blaming others may soothe your ego in the moment, it robs you of the power to change. But accountability, though painful, restores that power, putting you back in the driver's seat of your life. And this is why accountability is never easy but always necessary. Because it requires humility to admit your role in your struggles, discipline to correct your course, and courage to face the truth that you are not yet who you could be. And yet the paradox is that this very confrontation is what unlocks transformation. Because when you stop lying to yourself, you create the space for real change. And so accountability becomes both mirror and map. The mirror that shows you the reality of your choices, and the map that guides you toward better ones. And without it, growth is an illusion. Because no amount of positive thinking, motivational speeches, or lofty goals can replace the gritty honesty of holding yourself responsible. And this responsibility is not about guilt or self-punishment, but about empowerment. Because accountability is not the voice that says, I'm worthless because I failed, but the voice that says, I failed because of a choice I made, and I can choose differently next time. And that distinction is everything. Because guilt paralyzes, but accountability energizes. Guilt keeps you stuck in shame, but accountability pushes you into action. Guilt whispers, you are not enough. But accountability declares, you can become more. And so accountability is not a burden, but a gift, the tool that allows you to course correct, to grow, to rise, and to take ownership of your destiny. And when practiced consistently, it reshapes your entire life, because you stop wasting time blaming others and start investing time in building yourself. You stop resenting circumstances and start responding to them. You stop waiting for someone else to fix what only you can change. And in this shift, everything changes. Because suddenly obstacles become challenges you can navigate. Failures become lessons you can study, and setbacks become platforms for comeback. All because you took responsibility. And this mindset is especially vital in relationships, where it is easy to blame the other person for every problem. But accountability asks, what am I contributing to this dynamic? How am I showing up? What can I do differently? And when both people practice accountability, relationships flourish. Because honesty, growth, and trust replace defensiveness, blame and denial. And the same is true in work, in health, in learning, in every area. Because the more accountable you are, the more power you gain. And the more you blame, the weaker you remain. And so accountability is the key to empowerment, because it shifts your focus from what you cannot control, other people, the past, external circumstances, to what you can control, your mindset, your choices, your effort, your responses. And this shift is where growth lives, because growth has never been about controlling the world, but about controlling yourself. And this requires daily honesty, the kind of self-talk that asks, did I really give my best today? Did I follow through on my commitments? Am I living in alignment with my values? And while these questions may sting, they also save you, because they force you to face reality before it becomes regret. And in this way, accountability acts like a compass, continually pointing you back toward the path of growth. And yes, accountability can feel harsh, because it demands responsibility even when excuses are easy. But it also brings deep freedom, because when you realize that your growth does not depend on anyone else, you stop waiting, you stop resenting, you stop blaming, and you start building. And that realization is liberation, because you no longer live as a hostage to what others did or did not do, but as the author of your own evolution. And in this freedom, you grow not just in skills or habits, but in character, integrity, and strength. Because accountability is not only about correcting mistakes, but also about holding yourself to higher standards. Not just about saying, I'll take responsibility if I fail, but also about saying, I'll take responsibility to succeed. And this is what separates leaders from followers, achievers from complainers, growers from stagnators, because leaders do not say, it's not my fault. They say, it's my responsibility. And in that responsibility, they find solutions, they create progress, they inspire others, and most importantly, they grow. And so chapter 15 closes with this truth. Growth will always require accountability, because without it, you live in denial. You repeat the same mistakes. You hide from your own potential. But with it, you unlock the power to transform, to evolve, to rise beyond your past, and to create a life aligned with your highest self. And so if you want to grow, stop waiting for others to change. Stop excusing yourself. Stop blaming the world. And start holding yourself accountable. Not with shame, but with strength. Not with guilt, but with grace. Not with fear, but with faith. Because accountability is not a punishment, but a path. The path to growth. The path to freedom. The path to becoming who you are meant to be. And so, the final lesson is simple, yet profound. If it is always someone else's fault, you are not growing. But if you choose accountability, you are unstoppable.